Hi, and welcome to the Build and Exit podcast. I'm Julie Wilkinson, and I started the podcast off the back of the work we do at Wilkinson Accounting Solutions because I realised there was a gap in the market for SMEs and investors understanding sort of financial statements and needing support in acquisitions and exit planning. So I'm really excited today to have Todd Sullivan. Hi, Todd.
Hey, Julie. Thanks for having me. I'm a big fan of the company and the podcast, so appreciate being here.
Oh, no, thanks for coming on. So just a brief background about Todd and why I sort of invited him onto the podcast. So Todd currently owns a business called Exitwise that effectively helps businesses sell. Todd's background is really interesting. So he's sold multiple companies, but he's got a couple of interesting stories himself. So there's one company that he did successfully acquire, but as we're going to talk about it didn't go to plan initially and he had to build it back up. And then there's also another scenario where Todd's got a few funny stories of a business that didn't sell. So I think it's going to be really good for the listeners to have a bit of both because, you know, at the end of the day, we know, especially in the UK, we're quite far behind on exit planning and a lot of businesses don't sell. So I think it's going to be good to hear a mix. So first of all, Todd, I just want to thank you to come on and hand over to you to give an intro on yourself.
This is great. I'm a serial entrepreneur. For the last 25 years, I've built and sold 4 companies. And after my last exit in 2025, which I'm happy to talk about, I really got the freedom to do what I felt like I was born to do, which is help other founders. And so that's kind of a broad statement, but really decided that where the most need for entrepreneurs is really at the end of the entrepreneurial journey. It's the black box of M&A. So set up a company with a friend of mine who built and sold an enormous company, 1,000 people, enterprise value over $1 billion today. And so in a similar boat, like how do we give back? So we built a network of the best investment bankers all around the world in very specific niches. This is what Exitwise does. And we build M&A teams for free for founders that are thinking about selling. So it starts out with M&A investment bankers, M&A attorneys, certainly tax accounting. We do a lot of that exit planning ahead of time. And we, in many cases, give you what we call the exited advisor. So it is one of our colleagues that have sold a business for usually over $100 million, and they sit as an advisor on the advisory board of your company. And the model works exceedingly well. We have exits every month. We've got 2 coming up in the next couple of months or next couple of weeks. And so the business is really accelerating.
Oh, wow. No, that sounds brilliant. So I'm interested to hear about your journey on the M&A because
Sure.
I know we've talked about this offline. There's some really juicy stuff going on. So I'm quite excited about that, actually. Yeah. My understanding is you had a company that you were selling and it was going through relatively quickly and then it sort of all fell through. So I don't know if you want to tell us a little bit about like what happened in that company.
Yeah, sure. That business, it was called Spirit Shop. So spiritshop.com lives today, continues to grow. Very proud of what we built. But back in 2008, the investors and I decided it was time to sell the business. We had really good growth. And we saw that, with resources of a bigger partner, we could, really accelerate that growth. So we explored like a lot of companies do. We ended up getting offers from a variety of places and decided on one, which was a heavily invested venture-backed company called Zazzle out in Silicon Valley. And we saw what they were doing. They were making multiple acquisitions to really build up their business. And we liked the fit. We made them a production partner. There was a lot of integration happening even before we got acquired. And so kind of the story is, though, that although we signed our side of the purchase agreement, I moved out to their office, had my desk, was being driven around looking for apartments by them. They had an out clause, and their board on one of the days that I was there, one of my first days, tapped me on the shoulder and said, "You got to get out. We're canceling 5 acquisitions today." So they hadn't just done this to me. This had been done to 5 other companies because it was August of 2008 and their board decided that they needed to save all their cash. And so, there are a lot of details, right, that we could go into. But really the idea here is M&A is just very, very difficult. And I'm not sure that we surrounded ourselves with the right advice. We probably jumped the gun quite a bit. In that process, we let all our employees go find other jobs. We removed all of our kind of supply chain and turned it over to Zazzle. And so when they pulled the plug on that, we basically lost our company. So going from, a very successful, fast growing business to, virtually nothing in a moment was very, very hard to take. And you feel very foolish for falling into that situation. And really one of the primary reasons we started Exitwise to try to prevent that kind of situation from happening to other founders.
Yeah.
I can go in to more or the next stage of it, but you tell me what's most interesting to you.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's obviously, just personally as a people, that must be really hard to handle. It'd be, I know eventually you ended up growing it back up and selling it, but I think maybe give a bit of a insight into how you kind of got through that difficult stage and built it back up to eventually sell it. Because I think you ended up selling it for more, didn't you, than you originally was going to sell it to in that sale?
Yeah, for sure. I would say that it's a great question because for an entrepreneur, right, you're thinking of yourself on this entrepreneurial journey and wow, I get to sell to a company that's backed by Kleiner Perkins. I'm going to move out to Silicon Valley. I'm going to be that person that built and sold a business. And I'm so excited for the future. And you're thinking of yourself, who you're going to be, what your role is. And you're thinking a little too far ahead where you really need to be focusing on the business. If this doesn't go through, where the majority of these businesses, 30% are successful. So 70% of these M&A transactions fail when a business goes to market. At our size, right? Anywhere between, call it 20 million to 500 million in sales, the conversion rate or the success rate is incredibly low. So the advice to founders is really like, you cannot count your chickens before they hatch. For me, having basically going back tail between my legs to my investors and saying, I can't believe, what I just put everybody through. We've lost our employees, we've lost our suppliers. We don't really have a company. I structured a way to buy it from my investors and really put it on autopilot. It forced me to automate everything. I rebuilt the website on WordPress, got back some suppliers, and really reduced the company down to a fraction of what it was. And I was enamored with Silicon Valley, so I moved there anyway. And in the process of moving there, I was named one of the TechCrunch 50. I got to talk with a lot of people, a lot of investors, and launched other companies while I ran Spirit Shop on the side. And I can go into the other companies that I built and sold, but revived Spirit Shop over that period of time and sold it again in 2015. And I think that the benefit that we received was that I had to automate everything. I had to outsource everything. We had to do as much as we could with very few people and very, very little funding and very few resources. So in the end, the package that was purchased was so transferable to the next buyer that literally anybody could run this. And that it's kind of another lesson is that an entrepreneur has to really understand how transferable their business is to the next owner. And are you handing them an engine for future growth? And fortunately, we were able to do it. The acquirer recognized that. And, you can go to Spirit Shop today and see how big that company is now. I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, because they say, don't they? People don't really appreciate until something's on the line, I suppose. So, it's not as extreme as like your life was on the line. But I suppose once you built this business up and it comes crashing down like that, in the moment, you can think, oh my God, I've lost everything, can't you? Maybe in reality, if you hadn't, but you don't, at the time, you feel that way. But sometimes when you feel like you lose everything, that's when I suppose the inspirations come, because perhaps if that hadn't have happened, you would have just gone along with this sale and maybe not have Exitwise today.
Yeah, what it reminds me of is the entrepreneurial journey is a complete emotional and financial roller coaster. And so although when I describe that moment, it sounds incredibly catastrophic, which it was, and that it would really, crush a lot of people. But your listeners, your entrepreneurs know you're basically facing that kind of situation every day for the first year when you're starting your business. You are living day to day. You are crossing your fingers. You're working as hard as you can. You're making promises that you hope you can deliver on. And so I think managing those highs and lows, you can land a customer and have a great day, and one can leave the next day and your business is half of what it was. So we learn how to manage that emotional roller coaster, and you try not to put too much stock in any one event. For me, it happened to end up really great, right, in the end. But I felt more that, professionally, I had taken kind of this reputational hit, that I had made such a big mistake in going down this path. I think that was the hardest thing to take, is to face the people that, and frankly, co-founders and employees that were coming along. And telling them that look what your leader has done. That was probably the hardest part, not kind of like, not having the money or the new status on the other side.
Yeah. So anyway, that ended up quite successful because you built it and you sold it. I know you have another business though that you built, and then, well, it didn't go quite as successful. I think it's useful to talk about both things, because like you say, 70% of businesses that go to, well, a lot, businesses fail in the first 5 years, often because of poor cash flow. And then businesses can spend years building these business, building their dream business, what they think, and then they go to market and can never really sell it. So what's your experience of the one that didn't sell?
Yeah. So I think they're all great to share, right? So I've had 4 that have sold and 1 that didn't. And I think that it's a kind of a perfect example. I've actually had 2 that didn't. One was, in high school and shut it down. Nice cash flow when I was in school. But this one was a consumer product, right? And many of us come up with an idea like, I'm going to invent something and the world is going to buy it. And you learn a lot through that process. Ours was a toy, a kid's toy. And the fun story around it is that we got a meeting with the founder of Toys R Us. And if that person decides like, wow, this is a product and a product line that we want in Toys R Us, at the time, that was this amazing distribution if you were a little burgeoning toy company. So we had no money. All we had was our little prototypes. And the meeting was in New York, and we were working in Boston. And by the way, we're working in the attic of a fraternity house where the building isn't even open. So we are sneaking in and out to have free rent. I don't even know what we're eating. We're relying on parents to give us a little bit of money to build this company. And this is with building it with my brother. So we get this meeting and we have to figure out how to get to New York. And we decide, like, we know what time the meeting is. We're going to leave 4 hours to get from Boston to New York. It really should be 2.5, 3 hours. And we have to get to a train station, but we don't have a ride. A friend lends us a car. We get in the car and the car breaks down halfway through, and it's raining, halfway through the trip, and it's raining. And so we abandon the car under a bridge. We're carrying all our toys, and we're in suit and tie, right? Like these 2 fresh kids out of college carrying all our products in a cardboard box. And we've just abandoned a car under a bridge in the rain. And we hitchhike our way to a train station. We get on an Amtrak, and the Amtrak is going to take us right into Grand Central Station, and we'll take a cab to the office. We're like, okay, we're still good. We can make it. And we get on the train. We've probably lost an hour at this point, so the time is getting tighter. And halfway through the ride, the train breaks down. And it comes over the loudspeaker. The engine's, something's wrong. We're going to have another train meet us, replace parts. We're going to be here a while. And my brother just snaps. He's like all excited for this meeting. Everything's going against us. Now the train's breaking down. And we're telling people on our track, because we're social people and everybody wants to know, what are these 2 guys in suits carrying this big cardboard box doing? So they know the story. They know the mission to get to New York and meet with Cy Ziv, right, the founder of Toys R Us. And when my brother goes berserk on the train, like, we're never going to get there, somebody on the train encourages him that he should jump off the train, just jump off the train and run for it. And so my brother does this. He kicks open the train door, the emergency exit, and the lights go and the door opens and he jumps. And what's interesting is when you imagine a train, it's not just on a track on flat ground. it is way up on this kind of berm, and he slides down this rocky hill in the rain into the mud, and then just disappears into trees because we're in the middle of the woods. We have no idea where we are. And he runs for it, does what he does. And then security comes to the train and they grab me and they're like, it's a federal offense. You can't jump from a train. But they're these older guys, right? And I'm sorry. I don't know what my brother did. I'm doing anything to try to get myself a little bit of room because I know if my brother comes back, I'm jumping from this train too. But I've got this big cardboard box. And so you hear the crowd, which is the train, in another car start erupting. They're screaming. And it's my brother who has come back, climbed up the hill. He's covered in mud and he's waving his arms, but he's waving to the wrong train car because he can't see in. So he doesn't know which one he jumped from. And he just runs alongside of the train, just waving at every car. And you hear all these people cheering for this kid. And that same guy that said, you got to jump, he turns to me and he's like, you got to go. And I have a security guy on me. And if I knew his name, I would apologize today. But I just dropped this guy and I ran over him, kicked the same door, jumped out with the boxes and slid down to I-95 where my brother had a moving truck waiting for us. And this guy's in a U-Haul and he takes us, he drives us straight to the meeting. We show up, we're still covered in mud. And we show up about 10 minutes late and Sai Ziv says, I don't even want to hear this story. Just start your pitch. So it was an amazing, event, right, of the breakdowns and what we had to do to try to get one meeting to survive. In the end, we got a test, right? I'm feeling like all the emotion of that effort, because we got the test in Toys R Us. Wow. And ultimately that test didn't go well. And so we didn't get the order that would have, catapulted the company and started production and in the packaging and everything we had to do. But I guess to me, it was like, that is what we were willing to do, anything, right? To try to make a company work. And we had to shut it down. We ended up with zero, but a great story of, I would say, just perseverance and, do anything to try to make it happen.
Yeah. And when was that? Was that before this successful sale? Was that one of your first businesses? Was it?
Yeah. It was right out of college. We actually had two products that we separated out, and that one failed. The other one succeeded. We ended up building that company and selling it to the Amer Sports Group, which is a big sports conglomerate, and they bought it. So in the end, right, there was some financial success. But that particular side of the business did not survive.
And why didn't the product survive? What happened?
Well, when you get a test in Toys R Us, they give you placement in, a certain number of stores. It could be 1 or, 10, 20. And if the product doesn't sell through, then they're not going to commit to it. And then the second side of it was part of our product, the moat that we would create or the competitive advantage relied on some intellectual property that didn't come through. So we lost a patent that would have allowed us to maintain a price that Toys R Us was very interested in. But ultimately, the product didn't sell through well enough for them to say, yeah, we can market this or we can take this on.
Yeah. And I thought it was interesting, you said that you had this business in high school. What was your journey to entrepreneurship? What made you be like that from high school? I'm just interested because obviously a lot of people tend to go to corporate, don't they, or go to university and things like that. What was your experience of going into the journey?
Yeah, people have asked me that. Like, well, my dad was an entrepreneur. It was very accepted. My dad was a professional tennis player. He invented the first aluminum tennis racket. He licensed it to Spalding. It became the #1 selling racket in the world. And then he had a line of tennis clothes. So I would go to his factory and I would see clothes being made and shipped. And I'd see him go off to New York to sell JCPenney. And then I saw, like, as labor got prohibitively expensive in the United States, how he'd have to move apparel production to Puerto Rico and then Jamaica and then El Salvador. He sold a company, went to Malaysia, came back. And I worked in some of those factories, right? So entrepreneurship was, part of our family. And so I don't think I wasn't the crazy one. My dad was the crazy one first. So it was a lot easier for us. And we saw that life. we went through bankruptcy, personal bankruptcy, and then had the highs, right? When companies worked. And I think that we just understood what we were getting into. So I had a business in high school called Reflective Shine, and I would wax all the cars for law firms. And I would just show up there and do the work and hire employees. And, for 3 years in high school, first I was getting driven, and then I got my license and, grew that business to be able to do whatever I wanted over the summer and put a little bit down for college.
Yeah. And because because that's quite unusual, I suppose, growing up through that entrepreneurial journey. A lot of people, I do a lot of keynote talks. And one of the things I talk about is coming from corporate to entrepreneurship, especially acquisition entrepreneurs, because I was like that. I never really knew, none of my family had ever had businesses. I didn't actually go to university. I became a chartered accountant through work. I just did it as like at the time I did it as what you might call like an MVQ, apprenticeship. And I ended up starting my business because it was actually my husband that said to me, "Oh, you'd be great at running your own business." And I was a bit like, "Oh, I didn't know anything about business, in terms of like running a business or owning." And what I did was I started a CV writing business on the side of my job, just to see whether like I quite enjoyed it. Anyway, I ended up doing quite well. I did about 100 in a year, and I ended up having someone writing the CVs for me. And then that made me realize, oh, actually, I'm more entrepreneurial than I thought. And then obviously I took the leap and then started my accounting and consultancy firm. And then it's all gone from there, really. So when you see people that haven't come from the entrepreneurial journey, I mean, what advice do you give them about taking that plunge? Because it is scary. I know I did a lot of keynote talks to them. I'm just interested from your view, like, what do you say to people?
Yeah, I love the question. I don't know if my answer has evolved over time. I certainly think it's a very fulfilling life if you can manage the highs and lows, and you're constantly learning. I don't know. I've had one technology consulting job, and I felt like I was always learning in that job as well. But I think in entrepreneurship, I feel like, in high school, it was like I was on high school team, and then I got to college and I played college sports. And then I left college sports. I played professional hockey, but I really was in the minors. And I think the more you learn and the better you get, then you eventually make it into the pros. So I think that for entrepreneurship, I think you need to understand where you're trying to go and what it is going to take to get there. If you have the choice between starting a company and working somewhere, and you are thinking through that choice, go take the job. Because I think the entrepreneurs are really the ones that are going to be successful are the ones that say, no, there's no choice. I have to go do this. I have to go start this company. So that's one piece of advice I give, because it's kind of cautionary of how hard this journey is. And then the other is, I would say, if somebody thinks that they have a great idea and want to start a business, and I say, okay, have you worked in that industry before? And they say no. Then I say, well, then it's going to be very difficult. You don't know the nuances of that industry. Where are the little gaps, the solutions to the problems in that industry? What are they really? You probably would benefit. Go work in that industry that you love for a couple of years and really understand the problems that they're unwilling to solve, that you might be able to leave and solve for that industry. And then the last piece of advice I tend to give is it's much easier to start a company when you have a customer in hand. So if you have an idea, go pressure test that idea by selling a customer. It could be your current employer. And if you have that customer in hand and they say, look, I'll pay you $100,000 for the year to build me this solution, you're probably building a solution that other customers are going to want as well. But to start with a little bit of cash flow and have time to mess it up, to make it better, to refine, really understand the unit economics, the go-to-market strategy, everything what it's going to take to actually build a business, I think you'd be far better off, and it's a little bit it's less risky to start that way.
Yeah, I know when I started my journey. So when I left my job, I basically did about 2 years of just consulting because I was interested. I think so. I probably did about 15 different CFO or financial consulting roles, whatever you want to call them, because I was interested to see from an SME perspective, what do SMEs really need in finance? So I did a lot of different placements both in sort of acquisitions and in just normal businesses as well, different sizes to see. Because I actually, funnily enough, when I left my first consulting job, when I decided to do this, it was Jan 20, just before COVID, and then that all hit. But I did that, and it's only so because I've had the business 4 years, so I did for about 2 years, and then I hired my group CFO about 2 years in, and that was kind of like the start of our journey. We've kind of reinvented. We did an acquisition last year to reinvent. I suppose we've kind of reinvented the business model a little bit because we started to realize exactly what we wanted to offer. But I probably did about 2 years of not like documented research, like I wasn't sitting there for 2 years like documenting, but just going out and trying different placements before I built like a massive team or anything like that, just to see what works. That's kind of what I did when I started my sort of my finance journey through the accounting company.
That's a perfect example, right? To really learn while people are paying you, to be able to see where's the soft part in the drywall that you can punch through with a solution. And look what you've built today, right? It's for you're not even in the United States, and I see the marketing everywhere. So you obviously have grown something pretty special, and you deserve a lot of credit. It's a great way to start the business from a consulting perspective.
Oh, thanks. Anyway, so we're coming towards the end of the podcast now, and it's been so great to hear, because I just think it's so nice and refreshing for people to sort of, see these things happening, because a lot of people, I mean, like I said, I've had over 5,000 downloads, over 5,000 views on YouTube. And I speak to hundreds of business owners that have seen the podcast. And one thing that a lot of people say to me is, I just needed to see that episode today because I feel like I'm not alone. So there's so many people where acquisitions have maybe fallen through, or maybe that build it up. So I just think it's been really good to like hear the different sides of positives and negatives, because that's just life, isn't it? It's life as a business. It's not always plain sailing. But I'd be interested to hear, so what's next for you guys? I mean, what's your future plans?
Yeah, I mean, Exitwise is very purpose driven. We want to make the end of the entrepreneurial journey easier for every entrepreneur globally. We want to increase the success rate, lower the risk, and that if you make that happen, the entrepreneurial wheel will feed itself. Because like myself, having sold businesses, I invest in businesses. So if we can help entrepreneurs create those liquidity events, they reinvest into the ecosystem. I feel like today we have built the better way to M&A. I know it sounds silly, but when you get the best representation, you are playing on an uneven playing field. You are going into the battle of M&A with tanks behind you rather than a butter knife if you're trying to do it yourself. And working with groups like you, that is the number one thing. The starting position is having your finances in order and really understood by buyers. And the second is getting the best representation from investment banking. We think the third is being able to play inside baseball, is what I like to call it, where you have people that really understand what's on the other side and where your business fits the best to maximize value. And that's what our exited founders are able to do, is let you play kind of that inside baseball. So to us, we want to help 10,000 founders a year maximize their M&A outcomes. It is very much the mission to leave the world with entrepreneurship in a better place for everybody.
Oh, wow. I'm sure you're... and how long have you had Exitwise?
I sold about 11 businesses on my own under a different brand. And then when it really started to click, we've had Exitwise alive for 3 years. The brand has been around for 3 years. Oh. So yeah, it's a lot of kind of advisory, get ready, valuation, build your team, and exit after exit after exit.
Oh, well, brilliant. So it's been so great to have you on, Todd. Thanks for coming. And
thank you, Julie. Thanks for inviting me.
You're welcome. And I just want to say thanks so much to our listeners. If you love our show, hit the subscribe button or leave a rating and review. And I look forward to seeing you again soon.